Hi, everyone. I am so happy that you're here today. Today, I am going to be talking about this is our October workshop, and I'm going to be talking about figuring out what you really want. And I know some people are like, wait, that's kind of a strange topic, but I think that this one's important because, well, they're all important, of course. But this one is particularly important. But let me back up a little. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Caroline Holke, and I am a drink less coach. I help women get rid of the shitty parts of drinking so that they can create a life that they don't want to numb out of. And that's where this piece fits in, that second part, that creating a vision for that life that you want, that you don't want to miss any of. And really, what you can expect from this session is we're going to be talking about that part. We're going to be building out this vision of what you want it to look like. Because figuring out what you want is really helps it make it, we basically create a desire for that becomes more enticing than spending another evening sitting on the couch, drinking wine, and eating chips and watching TV. So that's kind of the logic behind it. And what we know is that life is it often looks like a lot of rinse and repeat because our thinking about things is pretty much rinse and repeat. Whether it be what we've done, the thinking that we've grown up with, this is the household that I grew up in, this is kind of the careers that my parents were in, my social set, all that stuff. And that's kind of where we land for the most part. And so understanding how to break out of that cycle is critically important. And it really starts with this idea of wanting what we want, figuring out what we want. Now, we were born knowing what we wanted. Anybody that's been around an infant knows this. There's an inherent understanding of that. And there's somewhere along the way that we've forgotten that. And I'm going to talk about that too. So today will be about breaking out of this cycle, kind of getting back in touch with figuring out what you want. Socrates said that the secret of change is to put on more of your energy on not fighting the old, but on building the new. I love that idea. And so kind of the way that my brain interprets that, my other version of that is it's much harder to waste time being wasted when you have someplace to go. And I don't mean that figuratively. Well, maybe figuratively, maybe you want to move someplace or whatever, but even just knowing where you want to go in your head, like having a clear vision for what you want. When that's clear, then the desire for that really just naturally pulls you towards it. Now, at this stage, most people will say, I have no clue what I want. So tell me in the chat if that resonates for you. Yeah, I thought so. Yeah. Okay. So let's start from kind of the macro perspective. What's going on here? Wanting what we want goes against what the primitive brain is telling us what to do. And this kind of harkens back from the caveman days or whatever, and the truth of the matter is there's safety in numbers. If you've ever seen a pack of teenagers, you know this, like they kind of clump together. They all dress pretty much alike because it's unsafe to be different. It's unsafe to go out and be alone. If we go back into, we need to be with our tribe. There's safety in numbers, all that stuff. And so what so often happens is that we end up playing small. We contort ourselves into the expectation of the group. So I think everybody's pretty much familiar with, square peg in a round hole. I think of that a little bit differently. I think of that as like we as individuals are all stars. And in order to fit into these holes, basically, you think of that hammer, we're hammering down that star into this round hole and we lose our stars, our star parts. And then we all end up looking the same. And then we wonder why we're frustrated, why we're not feeling completely fulfilled in our lives. Kind of makes sense when we look at it like that. So part of this, part of our time together today will involve some time for you to be writing things down. So include them in the chat, but also be sure to write things down for yourself, because what I found that's so important is that there's a certain level of intellectual understanding. We understand it cognitively, but we're not living it yet. This is why so often we go to lectures or workshops or whatever, and oh yeah, I get it. And then 5 seconds later, a day later, we're not implementing any of the work. None of it is sunk in. None of it has become like part of us, even when we take notes. So I've got some examples, some suggestions on how to integrate this further into your life. And let's start with this. What do you fear? Let's start with fear. What do you fear about figuring out what you want? What are those inner blocks for you? It's very common that when we get to this stage, when we get to any sort of major change, beliefs or fears are going to come up when we go into any kind of new growth areas. So I want to invite you to, think about what that is for you. And I'm going to list off some of those things that I hear pretty often. My ideas are not big enough. They're not like bucket list worthy, as if spending time with children or grandchildren or gardening or reading or whatever it is not big enough. So we discount that. We judge ourselves. Scared that this will rock the boat, that things will change. People around me will not approve. They're going to make fun of me. They're going to reject me. They'll be angry. I'll be judged. The world doesn't really need this. Whatever it is that I'm dreaming about. Who am I to want this? Scared of really stepping out there and being visible and going after this. Fear of disappointment. And what so often happens is these all kind of are wrapped up in this own inner not good enoughness. It is very, very common. So take a minute and write down the first thing that comes to mind for you. What is that? What is the fear? If you want to include that in the chat, that would be great too. Okay, now that you've identified those fears, I'm going to guess that that didn't start today. I'm going to guess that that is related to a fear or belief that's been with you a lot longer. Maybe the fear of rejection, the fear of being visible. Where did that fear or belief originate from? How old were you? What are some of the events that brought it into being? Maybe it's feeling trapped in choosing a major in college, or being a new student in, as an elementary student, needing to fit in. Maybe it has to do with your father's anger growing up, or never being taken seriously by a family member, or fear of causing harm that was, kind of instilled in you at your first job. It's really, really helpful to connect the threads back to where it came from. And then to be able to say to yourself today, like that's from the then and there. It's not about the here and now. and just have so much awareness for that and understand, why bring that up. Like just remind yourself of that when you're bringing it up today. And that could be so helpful in kind of letting go or being able to kind of set it aside or right size it so that you can take the next steps forward. So now that you're here in the here and now, what is the higher truth, the more helpful truth about that old belief? This is where your higher self is able to say, I am enough. Truth is, I will be okay. I'm just scared, and that's normal. I have everything I need. I don't need to be afraid of my gifts. That's the higher wisdom. And when we allow that fear to kind of have its voice, understand where to put it, then we can allow that higher wisdom to come through. And then we have an appropriate reframe for what's going on. Then we can kind of move into the area of pointing towards our future. Is that tracking for everybody? Give me a thumbs up. That works. So again, now that we've right-sized the past, which we've all spent way too much time thinking about what went wrong and what could have been better, and those horrible mistakes that I made, and it's how that's keeping me from moving forward today. So and so said something, whatever it is. I mean, litany, right? Now we can open up to what you want, figuring out what you want. It's really this idea of creating a bridge to the future. Okay. So, again, get your pen and paper out for you. Imagine for a minute what it would be like if you allowed yourself to want more. What would be better? What would be easier? Maybe you'd have the freedom to say what you're really thinking in the moment. Maybe you would kind of feel that weight off of your shoulders. So, because you weren't playing emotional hostess all the time. If you didn't have to worry about other people's tastes or what other people were thinking, you didn't have to worry about time or money or anything like that. What do you want for dinner? So often we're like, I don't care, whatever. But, at some point, at some level, we do. What are some of your favorite ways to spend time? This is my favorite. What do you love doing so much that you become engrossed in it and you forget to check your time or check your what? What's that thing called? Phone. Or the inverse of that, which is also helpful, is what are activities that you do where you're constantly picking up your phone? You're constantly distracting yourself and from where you are. Give yourself a minute to write that down. So the questions there are: imagine for a minute what it'd be like if you allowed yourself to want more. What would be better? What would be easier? I'll put that in the chat so that you can track with that. We'll give you a minute. Okay. Now we want to continue to move along in this area. What is an example of something that you wanted that you really went after in the past? What was that like for you? What good came from that? Again, jot down the first thing that comes to mind. A lot of times people will say, as you're writing, just listen to this. A lot of times people will say, I don't know exactly why this is coming up. Don't worry about why it's coming up. Just trust that it's coming up for a reason. Again, what was that like for you? And what good came from that? So often, the things that I hear are, and I've experienced for myself, is that I went from cognitively understanding to actually experiencing it, knowing that I can move forward even though I'm not 100% confident, even though I do have a little trepidation. I'm a little nervous. I'm a little scared, whatever it is. And the best feeling in the world is knowing that I can get to the other side and A, I got something that I wanted, and B, I didn't die in the process. And that I didn't die thing is really important because the primitive brain will have us believe that we're going to die in every one of these steps. Okay, if you've got a couple things written down, then come on back to me and we're going to talk about how to take this from, so we've gotten some understanding of where we're going, some the cognitive level. You've done some exercises into what your blocks are, what those fears are, where to place them, how to reframe them, understanding where they come from. That's more of the there and then than the here and now. Taking a look forward into what are the things that you want. And then, in order to really start embodying that work, I love the process of visualization. And a lot of people, well, I've heard some people say, well, that sounds a little woo woo, but here, let me give you the science because not, I'm really not woo woo. So here's the thing: the athletes visualize all the time. You can see that, when you're watching the Olympics and they pan to the gymnasts or something on the sidelines and they've got their headphones on and they're kind of, moving their bodies around. They literally are going through their routines in their head. And they're doing that because it works, because it primes the brain for success. And visualizing that really helps them do that. The other thing is, like, scientifically, it's proven. So there was a famous study that was done at Harvard a number of years ago and it was, they had two groups of people and it was a piano exercise. And they did brain scans before and after. And basically, the two groups, one group mentally rehearsed the piano exercises for 2 hours a day for 5 days a week. They never touched the keys. The other group did the same exercises, but they were physically on the keyboard. Now, they did brain scans before and after, and there was very little difference between the two brains, but between the two sets, right? So it proves two things from a scientific standpoint, just looking at, the what's happening in the gray matter in our brains, is that we can change our brains just by thinking. Yeah. We can create new neural pathways just by thinking. And really, when we're focused on something, when those people that were thinking about those piano exercises and mentally rehearsing them, the brain didn't know the difference. It didn't know the difference between actually hands on the keyboard and those that not, and the group that didn't have the hands on the keyboard. It's fascinating, really. And so it is proven out in a bunch of, there are multiple different examples of how this is proven out. But how can we utilize this in our own lives? How can we take a cognitive understanding of a concept and make it real for us? That is critically important. And what that looks like in this case, again, we're building out this vision for something that you want more in your life so that you can create a life that you don't want to numb out of. What does that life look like? A lot of people will say, well, I don't know. And if they do get closer to it, they'll say, well, I'll just be happier. Let's get more specific. Let's be like those athletes and like run through all the motions. Paint the picture of that, make that so alive and real that it comes to life, basically. So imagine the life that you really want. What does that look like? Where are you spending most of your time? Who are you going to be with? How much are you going to be drinking, if at all? What will you be eating? What clothes will you be wearing now that you've lost weight because you're not drinking as much? What will you be thinking about? And write this out as if you've achieved it in the present tense. This is really important. So, for example, it's 5:00. I arrive home from work. I make myself my favorite non-alcoholic drink. I really like that ritual, that transition between work and home. I change my clothes. I enjoy being present with my family for dinner. Again, my clothes are fitting better because I'm not consuming all these extra calories. I'm thinking about how proud I am of myself for having done this work, of who I have become because I put in this time. So you get the gist of that. Once you build that out, then imagine it. As I said, like this visualization thing works. And the reason that it works is because our minds create our future. Just like the example with the piano keys, right? The brain didn't know the difference between what was real and what was not, whether the hands were on the keyboard or not. It created that. So if you want something that's breakthrough, you have to start believing that and living into that as much as you can. Another aspect that I find so helpful is thinking about, what are you most grateful to yourself for having accomplished this? I'm so proud of myself for having done this. I am so happy and I feel free. I don't have the mental chatter anymore. What is it that you're so grateful to yourself for? And when you spend time imagining this, one thing that a little hack that I have found that I think is so powerful is, bring this to life and then think about it right before you go to sleep. And I feel like I kind of hand it over to my subconscious to kind of have fun with. And I have found that it's been really, really, really powerful. So super simple, not necessarily easy all the time, but simple. I mean, it makes sense, right? If we build out the vision of where we want to go and build up the desire for that more than the desire for the here and now, the wine in the hand, then that pulls us towards it. So that is kind of the teaching portion of what I have today. I do want to say that it's been an honor and a privilege to be with you. You guys that are on the line, stay here and I'll provide some coaching after I shut down. But I do want to say that we have just barely scratched the surface of what's possible here. This is one of the pillars that I teach in my private coaching program. And if you're feeling like you want to take this work deeper, I would love to talk with you, because doing that visualization work, like one-on-one, and having a coach prompt you on what else it could be and how we can make it richer, it's I've done that work myself. I've been on the receiving end. It's really, really powerful. So I'd love to meet with you, and together we'll explore how I can support you in reaching your goals. So thank you for being here.